John Finley heard the news first thing in the morning. 10 slaves had run off the night before. Finley, a 12-year-old slave on a plantation in Alabama, had a pretty good idea where the escapees had gone. Most certainly they had headed for the Union troops' camp a few miles to the north, and freedom. Finley too began to think about getting freedom. At last, with a mixture of hope and fear, he decided to make a break. At first, the Civil War was not a war against slavery, but as thousands of slaves like John Finley ran into the arms of the Union troops, with hope of freedom, some Northerners began to rethink the aims of war. The Civil War began as a war to restore the Union, not to end slavery. President Lincoln made this point clear in a letter that was widely distributed. If I could save the Union without freeing any slaves, I would do it. And if I could do it by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. And if I could do it by freeing some and leaving others alone, I would also do that. Lincoln had the reason for handling the slavery issue cautiously, because 4 slave states still remained in the Union. The president did not want to do anything that might cause these states to shift their loyalty to the Confederacy. The resources of the border states might allow the South to turn the tide of war. By mid-1862, Lincoln came to the belief that he could save the Union only by bordering the goals of the war. He decided to emancipate or free enslaved African Americans living in the Confederacy. In the 4 loyal slave states, however, slaves would not be freed, nor would slaves be freed in the Confederate lands that had already been captured by the Union, such as the city of New Orleans. Lincoln had a practical reason for his emancipation plan. At the start of the Civil War, more than 3 million slaves labored for the Confederacy. They helped grow the food that fed Confederate soldiers. They also worked in iron and lead mines that were vital to the South's war effort. Some served as nurses, cooks for the army. Lincoln knew that the emancipation would weaken the Confederates' ability to carry on the war. However, Lincoln did not want to anger slave owners in the Union. Also, he knew that many Northerners opposed freedom for enslaved African Americans. Lincoln hoped to introduce the idea of the emancipation slowly by limiting it to the territory controlled by the Confederacy. The president had led another motive. On January 1st, 1863, President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. The document declared that the following: on the first day of January, in the year of our Lord, 1863, all persons held as slaves within any state or part of a state, whose people shall then be in rebellion against the United States, shall then be free and forever free. Because the rebelling states were not under the Union control, no slaves were actually gaining their freedom. On January 1st, 1863, still the Emancipation Proclamation changed the purpose of war. Now, Union troops were fighting to end slavery as well as to save the Union. The opponents of slavery greeted the proclamation with joy. In Boston, African Americans abolished Frederick Douglass witnessed as one of many emotional celebrations took place. When he felt that he could act to freeing slaves without threatening the Union, he did so. Lincoln was concerned about the timing of his announcement. The war was not going well for the Union. He did not want Americans to think he was freeing slaves as a desperate effort to save a lost cause. He waited for a victory to commence his plans. On September 22nd, 1862, following the victory at Antietam, Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863. In the South, Lincoln's proclamation was seen as a friend's act that destroyed expensive property. The proclamation won the sympathy of Europeans, especially workers. As a result, it became less likely that Britain or any European country would come to the aid of the South. When the war began, thousands of free blacks volunteered to fight for the Union. At first, federal law forbade African Americans to serve as soldiers. When Congress repealed that law in 1862, however, both free African Americans and escaped slaves enlisted for the Union Army. The Army assigned African American volunteers to all black units, commanded by white officers. At first, the black Union troops served as laborers. They performed non-combat duties such as building roads and guarding supplies. Black troops received half the pay of white soldiers. African American soldiers protested against this policy of discrimination that denied them the same treatment as any other soldier. Gradually, conditions changed by 1863. African American troops were fighting in major battles against the Confederacy. In 1864, the United States War Department announced that all soldiers would receive equal pay by the end of the war. About 200,000 African Americans had fought for the Union. Nearly 40,000 lost their lives. One of the most famous African American units in the Union Army was the 54th Massachusetts Regiment. The 54th accepted African Americans from all across the North. Frederick Douglass helped recruit troops for the regiment, and two of his sons served in it. On July 18, 1863, the 54th Massachusetts Regiment led an attack on Fort Wagner near Charleston, South Carolina. Under heavy fire, troops fought their way into the fort before being forced to withdraw. In the spirit of fighting, almost half of the regiment was killed. The courage of the 54th Massachusetts and other regiments helped to win respect for African American soldiers. Sergeant William Carney of the 54th Massachusetts was the first of 16 African Americans to win the Medal of Honor in the Civil War. Such soldiers had proved themselves among the bravest of brave. Secretary of War Edwin Stanton told Lincoln, despite the Emancipation Proclamation, African Americans still worked in the South as slaves on plantations. However, many slaves slowed down their work or refused to work at all. In this way, they hoped to weaken the South's effort. They knew that victories for the Union troops had arrived in their area. They would be free. Thousands of enslaved African Americans took direct action to free themselves. Whenever a Union army appeared, slaves from all over the area would flee their former masters. They crossed the Union lines to freedom. By the end of the war, 1/4 of the South's enslaved population had escaped to freedom.